This is the And She Spoke podcast. And in today's episode, we are discussing the collapse of the 16th largest bank in America.
That would be Silicon Valley Bank. And what do we bank with, Jeni?
Spoiler alert, Silicon Valley Bank. Not anymore.
Oh my God. Okay.
Just have a moment of peace for the bank that failed.
Ooh, breathe out, and that we survived the last 4 days. If you haven't heard, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed on Friday. It is the bank that we have been using for the last 7-8 years. And so let's start. Jeni, do you want to start with me running through the facts as we understand it, and then go from there?
Let's start with the black and white facts.
Okay, so Friday, the SVB collapsed. It is the second biggest bank failure in the history of the world, apparently. So the way that it happened was last Wednesday, March 8th, Silicon Valley announces that it needs to raise funds. The CEO wrote a press release and announced that it needed to raise funds, and it tried to liquidate $21 billion worth of investment in an emergency sale. Thursday, customers got a little freaked out and they attempted to withdraw $42 billion, which is a quarter of the bank's total deposits in one day. So by the end of day, Silicon Valley was in a negative cash balance of $1 billion, and the stocks tanked by 60% that day. And then Friday, March 10th, the trading is halted because when the stock markets opened again, the stocks fell another 60%. The FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, shuts down the bank and took possession of the bank and all of its deposits. Done. It's over. 48 hours. The 16th largest bank is over.
Yeah, and it's not just the 16th largest bank. It is like the center of the world for startups.
Yeah.
So
I think there's so much to say here. I know way more about the American banking system than I ever chose to, and I certainly know more than the Canadian banking system at this point. It's just been a wild ride. So, Jeni, how did you find out about it?
Okay, so I found out about it like kind of simultaneously in two places. So I received an email from our credit card company alerting us to the fact that this was going on, and then also our COO slacking me on Thursday evening. And so we are not
New York Times article she slacked, right?
Yeah, she slacked a New York Times article, and then we had gotten an offer from we have a startup credit card called Brex, and we had gotten an offer from that company to switch everything over to their banking partner like immediately, that they would be there. They would be providing bridge loans. They would be starting a new bank, or maybe they already had a bank, but they'd be welcoming all of their customers, their credit card customers, into their bank. And so on Thursday evening, I kind of like was sitting in my living room on my laptop, and I just like was kind of like looking around thinking, like this might actually be something. And I messaged you, and you were like offline, which was like really respectable. And then I messaged you a few times, and then I was like, okay, Sandy must not be worried about this. Like, it's probably okay. But I was going back and forth with our COO in Slack.
Because you were saying, like, do you think we should panic? Do you think we should move funds out of SVB?
Yeah. And then I went on Twitter, and then I really started panicking myself because I was reading about like all of the startups that had already withdrawn money. Like a lot of startups that are funded by bigger VC investment houses like had been already told earlier in the day on Thursday to withdraw. And so I was like reading all the stories, and like a lot of people were saying like, oh, there's no way this is going to be a bank run. This couldn't happen at this scale. And then a lot of other people are like, well, I'm going to get my money out. So I fully intended on Friday to get some money out of our bank.
Yeah.
And then I had an appointment, and like I was leaving my appointment on Friday morning, and I logged into Slack and I saw that the bank had already been shut down. You had messaged me. And so it was this is like a very personal experience for us. And
Yeah.
I just want to like pause because it is March, and it is now today, the day we're recording this is March 13th. And March 13th, 3 years ago to this day, was the day that like the our walls caved in on us when the pandemic shut everything down and our company exploded literally
Mhm. Mhm.
overnight, like over day, that one day. And nothing has ever been the same. And you and I both have like a lot of
Mhm.
collective trauma about that experience of something very sudden and shocking happening that like was totally outside of our control and affected our lives and our company really dramatically. And like this was happening again, right? So that
Yeah.
was my
Yep.
actual first, it was like a physical
Yep.
reaction to
Yep.
the trauma, like
Yeah.
that hasn't stopped.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And I also know that Brex and all the SVB employees and the FDIC, all the people working behind the scenes are experiencing very similar like workloads and stress and worry, as many of us did in those early days of the pandemic. Yeah. So on Thursday night, when all this was going down, I had my laptop in my hands and I put it down and I very intentionally said, I'm not going to log in tonight. I'm just going to take a break. And then Friday, I, you know, open it up and I see like you're like, Sandy, do you need to be on the new bank account if we start one? And I was like, what? Because I'm in Canada, so it's super hard to get bank accounts with both of us. And I was like, what is she talking about? And then I went into our legal channel and with our COO and saw, and so immediately picked up Twitter. And you are not online. I know
No.
you're in your appointment. I have nobody to talk to. I'm reading all this stuff and I am full on anxiety, cannot breathe, sitting up in the kitchen at the window, like trying to collect myself with flashes of like, this could be it. We could lose
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And um, even though, like most of you who have been following this story, and $250,000 is insured, right? So we're under that threshold. So we knew that we have insurance for this deposit. We're probably getting it out, but I don't know, like, when does it happen? Like, who knows? There's so much uncertainty. I couldn't like process it all. I was just complete anxiety. And I just kept following. And then I see and nobody's tiered, like, you're not there. There's no one to talk to. And I'm trying to understand all this stuff. Like, I'm reading every single article from Bloomberg's to like the Wall Street Journal to Globe and Mail to everything. And then I see a tweet where this guy like takes a screenshot of the recent FDIC page, like the live like news bulletin updates, and it says SVB has been closed. And I'm like reading these words. I mean, it's been closed. Like, and then Twitter just blows up, right? Like it's been shut down and it's shuttered. And then you phone me from picking up your daughter and you're like, Sandy, are you okay? And I said, no. And you're like, what's
Hmm.
happening? I'm like, the FDIC just shut the bank down. And you were
Hmm.
like, shit. And
Hmm.
so now it's like, now what? Now what do you do? So we could still log into the bank, we could see things, but everything that was coming in and out was pending.
Yeah, it was
And
frozen. Yeah.
just no access, right? And we know that the following week, this week, we have payroll. We have
Hmm.
things coming out of that account. It's frozen. Like our
Hmm.
entire app, everything depends on paying bills so that things keep running. So we spent the entire day just like going through each payment that's coming out and making sure it went to our credit card and not just our debit card.
Yeah, and I was like rushing around trying to find a bank that would see
Right.
me in person in Arizona here on Friday. And it was like my daughter was getting out of school early for spring break, and we were supposed to like have a spring break day. And here I am like trying to run around and try to find a bank, and no banks would see
And
me. Obviously, like the world, like the banks are collapsing, right? Like everyone's freaked out. So I'm trying to find like one of the big four banks to get into because I don't want another hokey bank or like seemingly hokey bank or local bank at this point. I just want
no.
like I want like JP
Big
Morgan,
guns.
Wells Fargo. Like, I don't care. I just want
Yeah.
like something
Yeah.
that's too big to fail.
I
Yeah.
think it's important to say, like, we knew, like, once this was closed and, like, there's not gonna return, right? So we know we're gonna
Mhm.
get our cash out, our deposit out, but where do we put it? We have to pay people next week. We don't have a backup bank account, and it takes, as most of you know, it doesn't you can't just instantly get a business bank account, and
No.
so the new panic was like, we need to be able to, because the notice on the FDIC website said that we would be able to have access to our funds up to 250,000. So that's great, but where do we put it? Like, if
Mhm.
that's true, where do we transfer it to? So we panicked, like, oh my God, we need to start a bank account today. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I'm online trying to find anything in, meeting for you to take on, but everything was full. Like, it was just impossible. Anyway,
Yes.
we got it.
And because like the complexity of our business, right? We're a Delaware corporation. We operate as a foreign company in the state of Washington. I'm not in that state currently, living in a different state. You're in a different country, like because there's more than one person that owns 10% of the company. Like everyone who owns more than 10% needs to be involved in the big creation of the bank account. Like it's not simple.
Yeah,
And so, you have like flown to meet me before to set up bank
yeah,
accounts previously,
and I was
right? Like
ready to get on a
right,
plane to go
right.
down
Yeah.
and
I
move
was ready
money.
to fly to Washington. Like I was ready to meet you
Yeah,
in Seattle if that's what it took. And so it's just one of those things that I think, you know, um, I know a lot of people, many thousands of people went through the exact same thing that we did, Sandy. And like
mhm,
we had, more than six figures in this bank account. And so I was terrified we were losing this money. There have been lots of times where we have had well over $250,000 sitting in that account. And I just felt really grateful all weekend as we weren't sure until last night what
yeah,
was actually going to happen to the non insured money. I
mhm,
felt really grateful that we currently did not have that money sitting in there. And because if this had happened 6 months ago or 12 months ago or whenever, like we would have like been terrified of losing
oh my God,
like many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I know is what lots of founders were doing. And then like also this happened for us at the time of the month. Like we have
mm,
certain times of the month where we have a lot of charges and we just sort of completed that part of the month. Like it's just the way things line up with our banking. And so, yes, we have payroll for Americans this week, but most of our payroll happens in other weeks. And so, like, there's lots of things that lined up for us that, like, also
mhm,
made me feel really grateful all weekend when I was reading on Twitter, like, I couldn't tear myself away, like reading the stories
yeah,
of other companies and people were sending out, emails to their client list, like begging for them to like pre-buy things so that they could meet payroll this week and stuff.
yeah.
And just people, it's just been nuts. And so I just feel grateful and also like, come on, world. Like, how many more things are we going to have
I
thrown at
know,
us?
I know, I know.
Yeah.
It was like this balancing of like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
That money is insured. We will get it. We're
Yeah.
fine. There were stories of like startups who had like $38 million in that account and they get
Yeah.
250,000 guaranteed. Like now we know
Right.
that the government, the federal government's going to um, make sure that all depositors get all money. Shareholders are out of luck. And I think that's the right call in this case. So, but it's like when will you get it? Like, can I just on Monday morning transfer $38 million out? Like the uncertainty of not knowing how it all plays. Like, and we know we have
Mhm.
a software company that like the software shut down because so many people were using it in the pandemic the first couple of days. So I have like these visions of like SVB platform just like tanking because it can't handle
Mhm.
all the requests that are coming in to to wire money out, right?
Yeah. No, totally. I got up at 4 a.m. and started trying to log into our bank. Like I just kept refreshing
Yeah, and
every 5 minutes
yeah,
since 4 a.m. today,
yeah,
just because we were like, just so people understand, like we could log into our bank on Friday. And then at some point, like Friday night, I think it's when
yeah,
like
Friday
everything shut
afternoon
off
was
and it
shut,
had
yeah,
this big like warning on the website. And they're like, don't worry, the FDIC has taken over your bank and you'll, tune back in next week and you'll have access to your insured funds, is
yeah.
basically what the message
All
said.
banking will resume on Monday morning. Like,
Yeah.
really?
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 Yeah.
I know.
So Yeah.
It was such a weird feeling when that happened, like, because I kept, like, just even though the bank was frozen, I could log in and just stare at everything, right? I could just like,
Mhm.
"Okay, there's the money." We are screenshotting everything,
Yeah.
and then there was a point, like you said, that it just got shut and we couldn't even log in, and it was such an eerie feeling to, like, not even be able to look at the number on the screen. I don't know, it was brutal. But,
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, like, first of all, I'm still, like, in shock at how fast this happened in 48 hours, and a 40-year-old bank got taken out,
Mhm.
and the role that Twitter played and the role that social media played and the role that panic played was so interesting to me. So apparently, as I said, the CEO, issued a statement on Wednesday that they were raising money, um, to sort of back up their balance sheet basically. And I guess there was a Zoom call with the CEO and we weren't invited to the Zoom call. I guess we're not the big enough players, but he was on there with customers, depositors,
Mhm.
and he said the words, "The worst thing everyone can do is to panic," which I guess made everyone after that Zoom call completely freak out. And then
Mhm.
on Thursday, there were a number of venture capitalists advising the tech founders in their fund to take their money out. And so that was like, I think, what did I say? $42 billion were transferred out of SVB in one day because of a few people said, influential people in the VC
Mhm.
world said, I think you should get your money out. And that just spun out of
Mhm.
control. And everybody was talking about it on Twitter and it caused a mass panic. And I was reading this article, who knows where, because I read every single thing that passed through the feed on Twitter, SVB collapse hashtag. Um, they said like in 2000, like the biggest comparison is 2008, right? But back then, people didn't really even have smartphones, like we just didn't have this way to communicate. And so it was questioning the role of social media in the downfall of SVB, right?
Mhm.
Like someone said this and then just like goes.
Yep.
Everybody shares it, retweets it, and it just
Mhm.
and everyone's pulling money and there's a bank run.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. I remember when I was teaching law back in my previous career when, like, Twitter was really just taking off and becoming popular, one of the things that we were studying was the role that Twitter and social were playing sort of in Arab Spring and in like a lot of the big major social movements because it's like it's one of these things that it like grabs onto contagion and spreads it so much more
Yeah.
quickly than
Yeah.
anything else, and it does it politically and obviously financially, and so it's like one of these tools that I think as humans we've got to be like very vigilant about how it's being used and like questioning, is this something that we want to have around and want to have participating with, and what are the rules around that, because I mean this could have been really bad like
Yeah.
this, it still could
Yeah.
be, right? Like
Yeah.
it's Monday, it's March 13th, it's Monday, the middle of the day. We don't actually know how this story plays out
Yeah.
over the course of the coming days and weeks. Like
Right.
this could, we could be acting like, oh,
There could
everything's
be
fine
more
now.
banks could go
Right.
down. Yeah.
Or what else, right? Like what
Mhm.
else does
Yeah.
this cause to happen? Like what other kind of instability does this economic instability cause? Because I think like when you start questioning, like it never would have dawned on me that like we wouldn't be able to get the money out of this bank that we like, to me it's like
Mhm.
there's no question this is safe. And
Yeah.
so like what else isn't
It's not
safe, right?
safe.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
we had the pandemic that happened that like caused the entire everything like health wise around us to be questioned, and now this happens. It's like really like this
Yeah.
is like a house of cards that we're living in. I mean, that's how I
Yeah.
feel, is like what are all these things that I take for granted or hold, these assumptions about that aren't
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I like there is no certainty, right? That's the only
Mhm.
thing that is certain, that there is no certainty. And I think it's just we have to just really recognize that, like, nothing is for sure, nothing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when a bank that's 40 years old and had the deposit level, I can't remember what the act, it was like $209 billion,
Mhm.
they failed. Like, it's
Mhm.
just astounding. And, like, who's gonna feel okay in like a, what, I don't know what you call them down there, like a community bank, a smaller bank.
Yeah.
What's the word?
Nobody.
Right? Like, I know that they,
Yeah.
like, I would question it. Like, now everyone's gonna run to the big guys,
Mhm.
because why would you? Why would you take the chance when this can happen?
Mhm.
Now I think SVB is a unique bank because it was obviously started in Silicon Valley and it was very much for startups and it was the bank to go to. Um, so if you because they understood that industry, right? We started with SVB because of the accelerator that we were in. It was just like, go to that bank. There was no discussion. You didn't
We were
choose.
we were required to use that
You were
bank.
required. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and, like, I think most accelerators actually require this bank.
Uh-huh.
So because it's what is known and has been always known, if you're gonna do fundraising, like, this is the bank that you wire money in from investors.
Yeah.
It's also I think this is worth pointing out, it's one of the only banks that would allow non-US
Yes.
citizens to, like, really
Yes.
easily get credit
Yes.
cards and debit
That's
cards,
right.
and so, that was also really helpful for us because you
Yep.
and I were
Yep.
going into business
That's
together.
right. I do remember this.
And and like one of the most interesting things right now is that um you can't we can access our funds as of a few hours ago, but we cannot wire any money out of the United States. So like we cannot send any money to you, right? Like
Mhm.
we have to get it to another bank account first.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking about all of these companies that are
Mhm.
startups that have gone through an accelerator in the US and or have taken US investment and are largely based outside of the United States, are like they're
Yep.
still locked out of their money.
Yeah.
They can't access it. And so there's a lot, I think, of fallout
Yeah. The stories that
in
will
the
come.
startup world that's going to
Yep.
happen, and like what kind of diversity this is going to
Yep.
crush by just
Yes.
making it so hard to work across countries and
Yeah, and,
collaborate.
I also when you get on into the Twitter world, there's a lot of really disgusting comments and, but there's a lot of talk about, like, "Oh, those rich
Mhm.
billionaires, and they can lose their money and who cares?" And it was like it was just so wrong to me, like, these tech startups that yeah, sure, there are a few rich billionaire founders, but not all of them. And there was like all these women who would be like, SVB is the only bank. Like I had an idea for a startup. I went to 10 banks. I couldn't get an account. I couldn't get a credit card, but SVB understood my business and they gave it to me. And I could not have started my business without them because traditional banking does not understand
Mhm.
tech startup, right? And
Yeah.
so my heart was just broken for all these people and for SVB because it like we didn't have the best experience with them. But it sounds like there's so many people who got started because SVB would give them a bank account,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
and
so
yeah.
it's just like if that doesn't exist anymore, if you are a woman of color or um, a woman, like whatever,
Or from a
different country,
non-United States, yeah,
like, you don't have any
place.
choice. You gotta go talk to
Yeah.
Chase. Like, are they gonna, like, get it? And
No.
maybe they will now, I don't know.
I don't think so.
But
I feel like I could walk in and open a bank account at JP Morgan Chase because I had an existing personal relationship there,
right.
and that was the only way I could open a bank account for our company there this quickly and this effectively. And so there was a tremendous amount of luck and privilege because you and I tried to open a Chase bank account years
Oh,
ago
good lord.
together. You flew to the United States so that we could do that, and it was like this arduous
It was, like, 4
process of jumping
hours.
through hoops, and then we still couldn't get a credit
Credit
card
card.
because you're Canadian. Like it was just terrible. And then I mean, for those of you that are like wondering, to run a company at the scale that we do, you really need a credit card. Like our bills our bills are insane. And so to have that much cash just like flowing all the time out of a bank account through debit purchases is unrealistic. And so I just think like simple things like that it's hard to get a credit card for a company like ours, like those
Mhm,
things are going to stifle innovation,
mhm.
and they're
Yep,
going to make it so that people who are already experiencing a great deal of privilege are going to continue to have that privilege. And
yeah,
I mean that's just the truth of it, and including us, right? Like we're at a
yep,
place now where
yep,
we
for sure.
people want us to bank with them. That was not the case years
No,
ago.
back then,
And
no.
so I feel anyway like that's sad. That's
Yeah,
really
it is.
disappointing.
I don't think because I wasn't involved with the accelerator in the early days and I didn't start the SVB. I didn't understand like how important it was to that tech community and how I think it was something like 30% of all tech startups in the United States bank at SVB. And in some of the Twitter threads there was just like let them fail, like let them lose their money. And it was just
Yeah.
like so narrow-sighted to
Yeah.
want that sect, because all of them are on their freaking
Yeah, yeah, I
iPhone.
know. I was reading those comments too, where people are like, because there was some local politician in San Francisco that a bunch of people have retweeted who was basically like saying, let them fail. Like, let's not bail out these people,
Right.
these kinds of people. And like somebody is like, yeah, as you write
Like,
on the
yeah,
platform that was created as a startup, on the phone that was created as a startup, on the,
right.
like everything you do, you can do because of
Yeah.
startups.
Yeah.
And so I think like people just put blinders on and they don't actually consider the bigger picture of what they're saying, or like, yeah, like
Yeah,
it's
like, and then
just
they're gonna turn around and go take a yoga class on Marvelous and then use a
yeah,
face
yeah.
filter to live stream their thoughts about whatever. And
Yeah.
like, the innovation is just stifled if we can't get money to, and I think I read too, there's like a lot of environmental startups,
Yeah.
that
Oh
make
yeah.
it
Like all like the
SVB,
carbon neutrality
right?
group.
And
Yeah.
so, like,
Mhm.
they're just, like, done, they're all out. It
Yeah.
just would take you back, like, 30 years if we lost all these startups. So,
Yeah.
it was just, yeah, it was really unfortunate that it turned into this kinda chatter, but and there's just, it's such a naive way to think.
Well,
Um
and like, this is not big tech. This is not where Facebook has its money, right? Like this is these
Right.
is these are smaller companies where like as many people have pointed out, people like us work at far below market rates to create things in the world that never existed before, and that's like and we have an amazing team of people who for the most part work at below market rates. Right? That's what being part of a startup is. Like these are not cushy tech jobs. Like I don't know who out there thinks that that's what this is, but that is not what this is. Like, we don't like shave off all of the margin we can and hoard it in our like Scrooge McDuck swimming pools of gold. Like, we reinvested in our companies to create
Yeah.
something meaningful in the world. And so
And
it's just like, come on, guys.
even like, all of these tech companies that are locked out, who can't, the payroll is going to the designer and to the
Yeah.
website person and to, the HR team who have mortgages and lunches to make
Right.
for their children. It's not just like there's one person at the top raking in the billions and it doesn't affect anyone. For example, your husband's company happened to use a payroll company
That
that
routed through
that
SVB. Yeah.
routed through SVB, and your husband didn't get paid because all the money
Right.
was locked in
Yeah.
SVB, and they're
Yes.
not.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Ah!
That's an added layer to the stress of the weekend, which is that there was like a moment there where I was like, I don't know if either of us are ever going to get paid again. Like, actually,
That's not
like
stressful at all.
we're both in startups, and so like there's a lot of families like that, right? That are just like, oh, we didn't get paid, and very thankfully, I am not a person in this moment in my life that lives paycheck to paycheck, but a lot of people do. So I
Yeah,
just also
sure
want to
they
say,
do.
and then a lot of like Etsy uses SVB
Etsy.
for payroll
Ah,
processing. So a lot of
yes.
Etsy sellers
Yes.
weren't getting paid. And I mean, the story goes on and on and on. So you think about like how many people in the United States, it's more than half of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. So not getting paid on Friday had a real profound impact in people's lives. And so like that also has to be part of this story. Like thankfully, I think at this point
Yes.
the payroll processing and money processing companies have all caught up as far as I know. And so people like maybe it's a 2 or 3 day delay, but like people are going to have fees, overdraft fees, right? Like if you're living
Mhm.
paycheck to paycheck, having overdraft fees is a big deal for you.
Yeah.
Like that means you can't buy as much food. That means you can't buy gas to get to work or to take your kids to school or whatever it is. Like there's real effects here. And so I don't know. I think it's really like that's why that like echo chamber of Twitter is so
Right.
gross.
It's disgusting, yeah. But,
Mhm.
the flip side of this was we saw a lot of kindness and support. We saw venture capital firms saying to its founders, like, "We'll back you up so you can pay payroll." There were
Mhm.
companies like Nathan Latka, what's it called? Founder Path,
Yeah.
who were, like, raising money to get to founders as soon as possible so that they could make payroll or pay their bills, because we didn't know, like, a lot of them would get the 250 potentially on Monday, and then that doesn't like it's a drop in a bucket to pay, for
Right.
their payroll or whatever. Like it
It's like
doesn't mean
maybe
anything.
1 week of payroll and
Yeah,
operating,
it doesn't mean anything.
maybe for a
So
bigger startup. Yeah.
people were just like pulling money
Yeah.
together to support.
Mhm.
And that was kind of cool to watch that there was like, reach out to me, I've got you. There were also people saying, like, if you need to have a plan on how to handle this cash flow crisis, like I'm doing free sessions for you, and we're gonna plan, this is what I'm gonna do for you. Like just DM me. Like that was kind of
Mhm.
amazing too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it had that, like, early pandemic energy of,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's
"We're
true.
all in this, we've got you, like,
Yeah,
we're here, don't worry about it," kinda stuff.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to, like, really process this. Like, I think I'm gonna need some extra therapy and coaching around this whole thing, because,
And I
again, it's not just an isolated event. Like, for us, it is, just another another event in a series of events that have created a lot of just, like, mental and psychological harm.
I think, yeah, and then that's why I wanted to do this podcast today. So this is like the Monday that
Yeah.
everyone got access to the bank. It was the Monday after this whole thing collapsed. And it's like running on adrenaline for like 4 days straight and just like shaking, and then, checking all the sites and Twitter to see what's going on because it was happening, obviously happening in real time. You didn't wanna
Yeah.
miss anything. I knew that they would want to, because I read it on Twitter, I knew that they would want to make an announcement and either having someone to buy the bank or, have another plan. The government would have to step in before markets opened on in Asia, which is like 5 o'clock my time. So like
Mhm.
just like waiting, knowing that you just can't let it go, and it's just I just feel shaky, and I know we're fine, but I still like it's just ugh, it's just a terrible. I just can't come down from it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel, like, just rocked, just like, you kind of settle into, like, things are normalizing, and they're like, there's no stability, like you said, and I like to talk about it like islands of stability. Like, there was, like, a little tiny pocket of an island of stability there, like, post-pandemic island, and now I think the kind of I'll just be following the economy a lot more closely because, obviously, I feel like that's a responsibility I have in the role that I have to be paying attention to things, but, you know, at some point, like, I don't know, I feel like just reading Mary Oliver poetry and just,
Yeah,
like, feeling in my human body and, like, recognizing, like, the actual things in my physical space around me because all of this other stuff is these made up systems that we have, like, I've allowed them to have so much control of my
yeah,
life, and
mhm,
it feels really unhealthy, and, um, the other thing, Sandy, that I saw is a lot of founders and, like, investors
mhm,
actually were
mhm,
posting, like,
mhm.
really, like, look out for each other and
Mental
take care of
health.
yourself because,
Yeah,
like, this is the
yeah.
kind of thing that causes
Yeah,
suicide, right? Like, this is the
that
kind
was
of thing
my
that
thought
yeah.
too, is like if they lose that money,
Mhm. Mhm.
there is no like there will be suicides because
Yeah.
it all comes crashing down. So I thought
Yeah.
that too, but I was impressed with the level of like the mention, how often mental illness was mentioned, and if you
Yeah.
need help, here's resources. Like people
Yeah.
were just pulling stuff together to help each other. It was quite
Yeah.
remarkable. But yeah, so thankfully everyone's getting their money. The depositors are going to be covered. There's just billions of dollars being transferred as we speak out of SVB accounts.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Um,
go refresh. We're still waiting on a few transfers, like, as we're recording this
yeah,
podcast. Like, transfers were initiated, and we haven't seen them all,
yeah, come through.
go
I'm
into
sure they
different
will.
accounts yet, but it's a
Yeah.
bit nerve-wracking. Yeah, so this is kind of a live play-by-play, I think I thought about actually recording something over the weekend, but I think you and I were both such a mess that it wouldn't
I
have
think
been
no,
helpful.
I needed to know. I needed to see those
Mhm.
like back into the bank and transfer initiated and like that we were going to be able to make payroll, then we can
Yeah.
talk about it without bursting into tears or
I
screaming
know.
and swearing.
Yeah.
Um Okay, so
Okay.
that's it. That's like I just think it's important to hear the stories of the behind the scenes of running a company at this level. And for some of you, it may be like a distant news story, but to us, I don't know, minute by minute, we lived it for the last 4 days. So
Yeah.
Insane. All
Yeah.
right. Do you want to move on to join hustle?
Let's move on to join hustle. Let's do the hustle first because it's related.
Yeah. So I think the hustle is just to take a look at your bank. And I don't think, like, for me, the lessons learned here is I don't think as a business owner, I will ever be okay with just having one bank account anymore. I want to know that I have a place to instantly transfer if something happens to that bank. Um, and more importantly, so in Calgary here, I have a personal banker, private banker, and it's just really great to be able to have a person that you can pick up the phone and call. And then, as you said, you went and got Chase this morning. Yeah, this morning, you created our new Chase account, and you were able to get some things faster because you also had your private banking there too.
Yes.
So it's like a relationship means
Mhm.
everything in banking.
It really does. It just like it made this process go so much more smoothly. And I think so. So I think the hustle is like, yeah, check your bank. Like, just be careful about where you bank and like pay attention to your bank. Although I still would have felt like SVB was a super
Yeah,
safe bet
yeah,
for us. Diversification I think is important, and not just like, I also just think not having a ton of cash. Like, I
yeah.
don't know. I
Like,
mean,
you
that's
don't.
my like we're not financial advisors. Don't listen to us, but
Yeah, but
like,
I will say don't have $38 million in one place. I will
yeah,
say
that's a
that as
really
a
bad
non.
idea. Yeah, so just like honestly, I don't know, for me personally, it just makes me want to really reallocate like where those resources are.
Yeah,
And we have done a lot to not have a ton of cash sitting there, like
yeah,
to use the
yeah,
money in different ways and to invest it in different ways. And so I'm grateful that we made those choices. But even still, like I know a lot of people are like going to gold and like things like that right now. But I actually just like have some real estate, have some
yeah,
stocks, like have some cash, have some crypto, like maybe just like have a spread so that I mean, that's like my take on it. This again is totally not advice, but it's just like evaluate, like really think it through. For me, diversification seems like the way to go. Like that feels safer. Like the more banks, the more kinds of asset classes you have,
yeah,
the more just like spread it out, and then if
yeah,
anything catastrophic happens to anything, like you got other things.
yeah.
That's all.
And the more banks you have, each of those accounts, as I understand it, would be,
Yeah,
um,
each bank, like
yeah,
you can have one account within a bank that's
yeah,
insured. So yeah, so I think this is also going to cause a rise of an entirely new kind of sector in banking where like we've already
yeah,
experienced one of these. We're using one of them
yes,
now, but you put your money in and then it spreads your money out across as many banks as it needs to, so that you only have 250K in any single bank.
yeah,
And I think that that's just how people are going to bank now too, is like you're going to go to some kind of central hub, and then those people or that company is going to move your money around for you, which is probably smart. Although I think in the United States, I think that the rules are probably going to change because 250K is not as much money as it was when that rule was created, right? To insure that amount of money.
yeah,
So I also think that some rules are going to change around that.
yeah. And I just want to my Canadian friends, as I understand it, like, so we have 6 banks up here, and we pay more, and they are super stable, and it's there we don't like, the number of banks the US has is just astounding to me, and there was a graphic on floating around on Twitter showing how many banks have failed, and, in route, like, little circles to show the size, and then SVB and, Washington Mutual, is that right?
Yeah.
Washington Mutual? Those 2 banks are, like, huge, and then there's, like, hundreds of small banks that have failed. That just can't happen in Canada because of our regulations. And if any of the banks failed up here, would literally take out the Canadian economy. So it just won't happen. So the stability in Canada is totally different than the US, but we pay for it. It is
Mhm.
much, much, much more expensive up here to bank. Although SVB was
A lot. We're
w-
paying many hundreds of dollars a month
per
in just
month.
fees for
I
them to
never
do a
understood that.
statement to us. Like, it was
Oh my
so
God.
confusing to me. It
Yeah, it
never
was
made
super
any
confusing.
sense. Like, and they're making money off of by loaning our money out or investing our money,
Yeah,
and yet we're paying them so many hundreds of dollars every month.
it was
Yeah, so
insane.
that is a change from these normal banks, because in normal banks in the US, you actually like don't pay anything if you have a lot of money. That's my
Yeah,
experience. The more money you have, like you don't pay
right.
anything. You have less charges. So anyway, that's just like a whole weird
Yep.
thing. But
Okay, so the hustle is just look at your bank. and
Pay
there's going to
attention to
be
your
a
finances, your business
yes.
finances, your personal finances. Don't take anything for granted. Nothing is actually secure. Be smart.
It's like
That's all.
$100 bills in
Vigilant.
my mattress now.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like fireproof safe.
Yeah.
um, can I just tell
Okay,
you we
let's
were
do some joy.
looking?
Can we talk about something else?
Yeah, I have one more thing that's really funny that I want to tell everyone on the podcast. So, we've on and off been looking for houses here, like as another home in this new state where we're living now. And one of the houses that I toured, like, and I've been in this house multiple times because anyway, it was a good location. I didn't love the house, but also I couldn't buy the house because of this reason. It had a safe room. It had like a go room in the closet in the primary bedroom. There was like this really janky wall, like that like didn't match the rest of the house. Like it was like crooked and bumpy and weird. And there was a mirror on it, a big mirror. And I was like, what is this weird wall in this walk-in closet? And I like moved the mirror to the side and it was like a secret room. It was like a secret handmade janky room in a house with like the gun safe and like all these cameras in it. And I'm like, people are, and you're like selling your house with a real estate agent, and everyone who comes in your house now knows about your secret room because it's not actually hidden. It's like
But it's
so obvious.
yeah,
It's
that's
like,
like how will that work? If they come into the house to look for you, they'll like instantly see the wall is janky and it's like they'll find
yeah, I
you.
know somebody is like not doing a good job with their wall. I think my guess, and my husband and I talked about this because we've like been in the house multiple times because we're like, oh, maybe this is a good house, and then we can't actually buy the house because of this room. But because I cannot stand the idea of having that in my house. But like maybe the person like didn't want to hire someone to come and build this properly because they didn't want anyone to know it was there. So they like snuck the materials into their house and made their janky like escape room themselves because they like didn't want anyone to know it was there. And now like the secret's out because it's like listed on the MLS. But anyway, this just that like there's people legitimately that are like living like this, right? They're like, okay, there's no real society. I'm going to take all my money and my guns and I'm going to stick them in my fake janky closet room, and like that's where I'm hiding out. So
Okay. All right.
that's
I
such an
don't
American story, isn't it, Sandy? I knew you would
yeah.
appreciate it. That's like when I
Yeah.
told you when I was buying my truck. And for those of you that don't know, I have an F-150. And when I was buying my truck for myself a few years ago, and I was like picking all the configurations of the truck, and you could like put the handgun safe in like the center console. It's like one of the like features you pick when you're like designing your truck
No.
to,
No.
and you're like,
No.
what? You what? I was like, yeah, it's like the handgun safe. And you're like,
But is
what?
that weird to you or is that like a
It's like
normal like I
I
mean
think for a truck, it's not that weird that it was
uh-huh.
like
But did you
part
think
of
it
the
was weird
F-150 build.
as a
I mean, I wasn't gonna
non-handgun owner?
buy the
No, I know, but were
handgun
you just is it
compartment.
like just like picking your rims? Like it's the same thing? Like you did
Yeah,
you
it's like, "Oh, look at that. That's interesting."
I choose oh my god. Like a gun rack, I get because like out here in
Oh my
Alberta,
god,
got
Sandy.
lots of those.
My father was a card-carrying member of the NRA, so we don't need to get into this conversation right now, but no, it was not shocking to me. That's the answer.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Can
All
we
right.
please have some joy?
We
Give me
can
some
move on
joy.
now.
Hit me with joy.
Move on. Okay, now that society has totally collapsed and you've heard us talk about that, let me talk about something beautiful. So, my joy is just so I went to Taliesin West, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's southwest home where he used to winter with his proteges and his family. And I had been holding off on going because I just really wanted to go at a time where I had some like mental space. So of course I chose the weekend where
The
the
bank's
banks were
collapsing.
crashing, and I just actually went for the opposite reason that I needed to like totally
Yeah.
distract myself. So we went to Taliesin West and it was so amazing, and just to like be in the creative
Mm,
physical space of someone like Frank Lloyd Wright, who
mhm.
obviously is so iconic and brilliant, and um it was just so cool to like experience the architecture
Wow.
because just like reading about
Yeah.
someone or
Yeah.
like studying their designs. I mean, like the Guggenheim obviously is amazing. That's the only building of his that I had ever actually been in, which I love in New York. But anyway, so I finally went to this, and there's just all these like really amazing like design features, Sandy, where like he has this idea that when you go into a space, like go into a building, you go through this tiny, tiny entrance, like, and then when you get into
Mm,
and you get into the space, it's this expansive experience because you have to go through this almost like tunnel,
mhm,
tiny little doors and like cramped spaces where you feel like you almost have to duck, and then you like get into the room, and it's like breathing, like it's just like your body and
mm,
like physically relaxes because you've just went through this like transitional space, and then you're like birthed into the rooms. It's just,
mm.
oh, it's just amazing. I loved
So
it
is
so
it
much.
just like a public place that you just
It's a
pay and you can go tour?
museum
A
now.
museum.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can go to like a bunch of his different buildings are part of, I guess, this connected museum. I don't really understand it all, but yeah, it's like, so this was his it was like his winter residence for years and years and years,
Mm,
and so he would bring like all of his students, basically all of his apprentices with him, and they would like travel en masse between Wisconsin and Arizona. And in the winter, they would spend all this time, and they had like no glass or anything in the windows. It was just like these tents, but it was like these. The architecture is like this concrete and these stones that they found on the property in the desert,
mm.
and the way the windows are configured, like everything is just intentional. I think that's why I
Wow.
loved it so much. Like
Yeah,
every
yeah.
view of every space and every design of every single thing is intentional. And um it was really, really freaking cool.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is
Highly recommend.
yeah, I wanna see that next time I come down
Yeah.
there. That's
Next
cool.
time you
My
come to
brother is an
Arizona.
architect, so I know of Frank Lloyd Wright because of him, and I also just love I mean, who doesn't love
Yeah.
the buildings? I don't know if maybe there's a few people, but it just there's a couple homes that I'm always looking for a new house here, and there was a couple that reminded me. I call them the Frank Lloyd Wright houses, or not really, but it's like this. Just something about the way that they were. The layout was just like very Frank Lloyd Wright. I just loved it. I loved it. There's this
So
one house
he
that had my eye on it.
Yeah, I mean, you should totally do it. I think it's just like quality of life if you can live in a house like that. He has this whole theory that you build, like it's organic architecture, right? So it's that the designed space fits in like organically with the
Mm,
natural space. And
mhm,
it doesn't mean like organic the way we think of that word usually, but he has this idea that you build on the brow of a piece of land. And so you don't build on the highest point or the lowest point, you build on like the brow, because like it should fit at this kind of like, the architecture should be at this like natural level where it would make sense to frame the landscape, like your eyebrows frame your face.
mhm.
It's just like, oh my god, I
That's
wish
super cool.
everything was this intentional. Oh, and he had like breezeways because it's the desert, right? And so like
Mm,
he would build these breezeways, and you stand in them, and like because of some kind of physics effect that I can't remember the name of, like it gets windy. Like
mm.
there's no wind, and you stand in these breezeways and it's windy there because it's been architected to
Wow.
be windy and like have air movement. And it's
Uh-huh.
just, oh my god, humans are capable of so much, and we like really don't use it. Like, why do we not design everything like this?
'Cause we're too busy tearing each other apart on Twitter, on apps.
Apparently. Like, honestly, like, we should all just think a little bit more intentionally about the spaces that we live in and the
And the
spaces
work
where
that
we
we
work
do, like, where we
and the
wanna
work that we
focus
do.
and what we spend our time on, you know?
Yeah.
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 Okay. That was,
All right.
a
Well,
a good one.
yeah. So if you are anywhere near a Frank Lloyd Wright piece of architecture, highly recommend that you would go and experience it, immerse in person. It's worth it. It's
And then go meet your
spectacular.
banker.
And then take care of your ish and diversify your assets across lots of places, because nothing is safe, nothing is secure. Welcome to 2023.
Alright, thanks, Jenny.
All right. See you next time.